Okay, good morning everyone. Shalom Aleichem, Bruchim Abayim. Our first offering for today is Pesacheinu Megadim. We're connecting the beginning and end of the Parsha. Parshas Beha'aloscha. So let me tell you to take you to the printed sheet. By the way, if you want to be able to see it for yourself, you could subscribe to our email. You go to our site, office@RabbiDG.com, subscribe, and you will get the information about the Shiurim and upcoming events to your inbox at least twice a week. Okay, so we have Pesacheinu Megadim, and we're going to connect the beginning and end of the Parsha. Let's start with the following offering, since today is the yahrzeit of Rav Moshe Wolfson, Zecher Tzak Levracha, and my friend Rabbi Rafael Ansel of France sent me an amazing idea connecting the beginning and end of the Parsha. We know that at the end of Parshas Nasai, the Nesiim brought their karbanos to inaugurate the Mishkan, and they brought it for the first 12 days of Nisan, and each Shevet was represented with the exception of Shevet Levi. Shevet Levi was not represented. And Aaron HaKohen had Chalishas Hadas. He felt bad. Aaron HaKohen felt bad that Shevet Levi was not represented. So Hashem said, no, don't sweat it, Aaron. Don't worry. Shalcha gadol mishalahem. Yours is greater than theirs. Meaning what you're doing for the Mishkan is greater. Why? Sha'ata madlik u'meitav haneros. You light and you clean the neros. And the Ramban learns that's a reference to Chanukah, that Hashem told Aaron, don't sweat it. You will have the miracle of Chanukah. So that's the beginning of the Parsha. Beha'aloscha haneros almo pnei menorah ya'iru eis shivas haneros. That is a reference to Chanukah. How does the Parsha end? This is really unbelievable. The Parsha ends. The people did not travel until Miriam was gathered. So they waited for her 7 days. And that is, they waited for her until the 29th day of Sivan. The 29th day of Sivan is when they sent out the Meraglim. We once explained that's what it means. Ba'oisa shak kesherim hayu. The first day, the Meraglim were good because they were still going during the month of Sivan. However, once the month of Tammuz came, it, so to speak, went downhill because Tammuz is the month of Esav. In any event, they waited until Chav Tes Sivan. Had they not waited the 7 days, so they would have done it 7 days earlier. Chav Ches, Chav Zayin, Chav Vav, Chav Hey, Chav Daled. It would have been on Chav Gimel. It would have happened on the 23rd. What would have occurred if they sent out the Meraglim on the 23rd? They would have destroyed the 23rd day of Sivan. They would have impugned the 23rd day of Sivan. They would have sullied the 23rd day of Sivan. The 23rd day of Sivan would have been defiled. Now, the 23rd day of Sivan is extremely important. Did you know that the 23rd day of Sivan is one of the joyous days of the year? That is the day that they sent out the second letters in the times of Purim to rescind the original letters to destroy the Jewish people, and instead we were able to take revenge against our enemies. The pasuk in Esther that talks about the 23rd day of Sivan, the Roikeach says, is the longest pasuk in the whole Tanakh. It has 43 letters because it is a pasuk of great simcha. Vayikara'u soifrei hamelech vayisahi b'chodesh hashlishi b'chodesh Sivan b'shlai shavi yasrim bai. It was the 23rd day of Sivan that we were given reshus to avenge our enemy. This is the longest pasuk in the Torah. Regarding this day, it says in the Megillah, La Yehudim Haisa Oira V'Simcha B'Samzikar. Because they waited 7 days for Miriam, the 23rd day of Sivan was not defiled. They were able to preserve the Kedusha and the sanctity and the power of Purim. So therefore, they were able to makabel the Torah on Purim. So thanks, so to speak, to the Lashon Hara of Miriam, Purim was saved. Had it not been for the Lashon Hara of Miriam, then we would have sent out the Meraglim on the 23rd day of Sivan, and then we would have been up the creek without a paddle. Rabbi Moshe Wolfson even says, what was the Lashon Hara that Miriam said? Ki isha kushis lakach. He took a Midianite woman, which is Gematria. It should say 1,204, the same as Hakimoisi es Devar Hashem, which is what Shaul said. When Shaul didn't kill Amalek, Shaul said, okay, but because of me, there'll be a Purim, and Klal Yisrael will be Makabel the Torah Ba'ava. So Miriam, through her Lashon Hara, and Shaul, by leaving Amalek alive, they preserved Purim. So think about it. The Parsha begins with Chanukah, and it ends with Purim. As we know, the Shla HaKadosh says, Chanukah and Purim are two friends who are always embracing each other. So Parshas Beha'aloscha begins with Chanukah and ends with Purim. Another interesting observation. You know, it says, Beha'aloscha hanerois el mol pnei ha-menorah ya'iru shivas hanerois. The Parsha ends, Vatisager Miriam michutz l'machal shivas yamim. Interesting connection. That there's 7 branches of the menorah, and there are 7, Miriam was, so to speak, locked up michutz l'machal for 7 days. So my friend Daniel Weinstein pointed out this similarity between the 7 branches of the menorah and the opening of the Parsha and the 7 days that Miriam was locked up. And so the question is, okay, what do we do with that? What do we do with the 7 branches of the menorah and the 7 days that Miriam was locked up? In the Sefer Pri Chaim, I saw in the Pri Chaim of Rabbi Chaim Yaakov Safran, he connects it, the 7 Kinei HaMenorah, connected to the 7 Chumashim. We know that the Gemara in Shabbos says there are really 7 books in the Chumash: Bereshis, Shemais, Vayikra, Bamidbar before Vayhi ben Saya, Bamidbar the Psukim of Vayhi ben Saya, Bamidbar after Vayhi ben Saya, and then Devarim. So the 7 branches of the menorah correspond to the 7 Chumashim, and we know that Miriam also, because of her, we were zeicha to Makabel the Torah. She was the one who, in her merit, the Be'er was given to Klal Yisrael, which was a preparation for Kabbalas HaTorah. The Sefer La'omko Shal Mikra also says there's a connection between the beginning and the end of the Parsha. The Shivas Yamim at the end of the Parsha connected the Shiva Hanerois, that the Zechus of lighting those 7 Nerois stood up for Aaron and Miriam to bring them back to their original Madrega after 7 days. Also in the commentaries on Likutei Maran, or Rav Nachman of Breslov, he brings that the 7 days Miriam was locked up outside of the Machaneh correspond to the 7 Nerois that through them were able to somehow achieve what is called Seichel Hamakif. But here's my favorite one. You know, if you look at the end of the Parsha says that Miriam needs to be locked up really 14 days. Why? The Gemara, the pasuk makes a kal v'chaymer. Ve'aviha yarak b'faneha. If her father would have spit in her face, halo yisi kalem shivas yamim. Really, she would have to be locked up 7 days. The logic is like this: Ve'aviha yarak b'faneha halo yisi kalem shivas yamim tisager Miriam Shivas Yamim. So Rashi brings the Chazal that if her father would have showed her displeasure, she would have to be locked up 7 days. Kal v'chomer for the Shechina 14 days. So everybody asks on Rashi, what kind of kal v'chomer is that? The only way to make a kal v'chomer is that if the smaller one is 7 days, the greater one should be more than 7 days, or at least 7 days. How do you get 14? So the Gur Aryeh says, well, in the beginning of the Parsha, I already pointed out, it doesn't say Shiva Nerois. Shiva Nerois would imply 7 individual, independent candles. It says Shivas Hanerois. the group of 7 candles, which means the 7 candles are one unit. Likewise, if Miriam if her father would have showed her displeasure, it says over here, Tisager Shivas Yamim, she would have to be locked up a unit of 7 days. But this is Hashem, it has to be more than 1 unit. How many? 2 units, 14 days. So actually, from the beginning of the Parsha, where it uses the word Shivas, we glean that the word Shivas is not 7 independent, but the unit of 7. Therefore, if it says that Miriam should be more than Shivas, it should be 2 units. That's where Chazal learn it should be 14. Let's delve into a few more connections. The Parsha ends talking about the superiority of the Nevuah of Moshe Rabbeinu and the Madrega of Moshe, where it says, "Vayomer Shimuna Devarayim Yia Neviachem Hashem B'amare Elav Esfada B'chalom Adaber Bay." No, Pel Adaber Bay Umare V'loy B'chidois. When I talk to Moshe, Miriam, how dare you speak about Moshe that he's just like an ordinary Navi? By the way, it's amazing. Today's Chafetz Chaim. By the way, I'm going to do you a big favor now. I want everyone to go to the site and make sure you join the Chafetz Chaim group. Every morning, we learn Sefer Chafetz Chaim from 9:15 to about 9:25. Or you could hear the recording after. If you want to sign up to the group, you could join it on the site. Today's Chafetz Chaim was the mitzvah to remember every day what happened to Miriam. Namely, what happened to Miriam? Miriam was punished severely. What did she do wrong? She equated Moshe Rabbeinu to other Nevi'im. Which means the Parsha ends criticizing Miriam. Don't you realize Moshe Rabbeinu's Nevuah is superior to anyone else's Nevuah? Moshe Rabbeinu's Nevuah is Peh el Peh. Why are you not afraid to speak about Moshe? This is very connected to the beginning of the Parsha. First of all, we already said many times, the Pasuk Vayidaber Hashem al Moshe Leimar articulates the greatness of the prophecy of Moshe. Vayidaber Hashem al Moshe Leimar indicates Hashem speaking to Moshe Rabbeinu, Peh el Peh, without any intermediary, on the highest level of vision, clarity of prism. And so the end of the Parsha connects to the Pasuk Vayidaber Hashem al Moshe Leimar, but then furthermore, the Satmar Rebbe quotes the Shla HaKadosh. I could not find it in the Shla HaKadosh, that the Shiva Kinei HaMenorah correspond to the 7 Royim, Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov on the right side, Aaron, Yosef, and David on the left, and the middle branch is Moshe Rabbeinu. So when the pasuk says, El mul pnei ha-menorah ya'iru eish shivas haneros, it's referring to the superiority of Moshe Rabbeinu, that even the great Nevi'im in history, they're all humbled before Moshe Rabbeinu, which again, this is the theme of both the beginning and the end of the Parsha. By the way, the Sefer Koirei Meirosh carries this a little bit further, that the superiority of the Nevuah of Moshe Rabbeinu, which is indicated by this idea, which is namely the idea of El Mol Pnei HaMenorah Ya'iru Eish Shivas Haneros. This is also supported by the final pasuk of the Parsha, V'yachar nasu ha'am mechatzeros v'yachanu b'midbar Paran. How? Again, the Parsha begins talking about the greatness of the Nevuah of Moshe Rabbeinu. And he quotes, the question is, how did Aaron and Miriam not know about this? How could they speak Lashon Hara about Moshe? And the answer is, the Toldos Yaakov Yosef brings that the reason why Klal Yisrael were Zoicha to Nevuah at the Yam when they sang Shira and by Matan Torah was only temporary. And then it was taken away from them. Like it says, Shuvu lachem la'ohalechem. By Moshe Rabbeinu, he was the only one who was left with Nevuah. Even Aaron was stripped of his Nevuah. Even Aaron reverted back to his Madrega. Everyone else was able to go back to their spouses except for Moshe Rabbeinu. And the reason that Aaron and Miriam spoke about Moshe is they could not understand how Moshe Rabbeinu was able to preserve his madrega of nevuah that he received from Moshe Rabbeinu. So the question is, if Aaron knew the madrega of Moshe, like the menorah is merumas, el mo pnei ha-menorah, so then why would he speak lashon hara about him at the end of the parsha? You know what the answer is? Because after Matan Torah, nasu ha'amei chatzeros. At Matan Torah, they were in the courtyards of Hashem, like it says, shesulim beveis Hashem, bechatzrois Elokeinu yafricha. But after Matan Torah, they traveled from Chatzeros, and they moved on from Matan Torah, and they lost their madrega, and they went to Midbar Paran. Midbar Paran is a lashon of pru, that once they went to Midbar Paran, everyone had children through the mitzvah of Shuvu Lachem La'ayalechem. So Midbar Paran denotes the madregos that were lost from at Matan Torah. Even Aaron and Miriam lost their madrega. So again, the Parsha begins the greatness of the nevuah of Moshe. Moshe Rabbeinu was the center branch of the menorah. El mo pnei menorah, ya'iru shivas haderos. So the question is, how could Aaron and Miriam speak lashon hara about Moshe? The answer is, because they left Matan Torah and they lost their madrega, and they didn't realize that they lost their madrega, but Moshe Rabbeinu didn't. That's merumaz in the end of the Parsha. Ve'achar nasu ha'am mechatzeros vayachanu b'midbar paran. They left the madrega of Matan Torah, which was that everyone has to separate from their spouse, and they reverted back to the madrega of Shuvu Lachem La'ayalechem. Another idea is found in the Sefer Kovetz Imrei Kodesh, that the words V'achar nasu amei chatzeros vayachanu b'midbar paran provide us with a connection between the end of the parsha and the beginning. Namely, Hashem was mavtiach Aaron that the menorah will never be batal. It's going on the Neros of Chanukah. The Bnei Yissaschar says that the lighting of the Neros of Chanukah is an inauguration of the third Beis HaMikdash. This is merumaz. V'achar nasu ha'am me chatzeros. Chatzeros is a remez to Chanukah, like v'achar kein bo v'anechel v'ir v'yisech v'nisach v'liko neros b'chatzrois kodshecha. That's where the miracle of the menorah took place. V'yachanu b'midbar paran. V'yachanu b'midbar paran is Rashi Tevois. Is the Rashi Tevois Vav Beis Pei is gematria Lahadlik Ner Chanukah 88. The Soifei Tevois of Midbar Paran are Ner. Vayachanu b'Midbar Paran is Soifei Tevois Nun Vav Reish, which is like fire, Nura. So again, the end of the Parsha is Merames to the miracle of Chanukah. So these are a number of connections. Again, we have the Remes to Chanukah in the beginning and the end. We have the Remes to Purim at the end of the Parsha. We have the idea of the 7 branches of the menorah and the 7 days that Miriam was locked up. And the Parsha begins with the superiority of the Nevuah of Moshe Rabbeinu, which is how the Parsha ends. Okay? Offering number 1.